And we are back. It's good to be back. We took a week off. My family and I had to go out to California. Flew there, first time flying since the COVID stuff happened. But it all went fine. Masks on the plane, blah, blah, blah. But kids did great. Got to see the cousins and all that. We went out there to celebrate a kind of a wedding. The final Flugie kid out of 10 was getting married. She actually got married the week before. And we weren't able to go because of California restrictions on numbers in churches and all that sort of stuff. But they were able to have just a Flugie get-together, which sounds kind of small, but it's kind of big with the Flugies with 10 kids 10 kids and all the grandkids and all that sort of stuff. But it was good. Nobody was sick. Knock on wood that we're all fine too. And we're back. So, 2 weeks ago, we went over Leviticus Chapter 13. Long chapter, or maybe the longest chapter there is. 50 some odd verses. What is it? 59 verses. And it just meticulously went through all of the things of skin disease, right? Skin disease, and then also diseases. They call them diseases for whatever reason. That dealt with clothing as well. But remember, all this laws about the skin diseases, the laws about leprosy, in no way, shape, or form was this attempting to make a medical diagnosis and trying to figure out the best way to deal with the disease itself. It was for the priest to be able to distinguish between clean and unclean, right? And so this was what was going on with the skin diseases. And you'll notice there were some pretty definitive things if you added skin disease compared to another type of disease. These skin diseases, this eating away of the flesh, very much resembled, and we see this in the way that the people with skin diseases had to deal with themselves, resembled death. And not only that, so it was kind of a living death sort of thing. But not only that, but we see being ritually cleansed. We'll see this in chapter 14 from a skin disease is the same way in which people are ritually cleansed once again after they have contact with a corpse. So we see these connections there. So in a very real sense, if you came down with a skin disease, this was a cutting off of you from not only the things of the sanctuary, but also the things of the community. You had to live outside the community until this skin disease, God willing, was taken away from you, and you were healed from it. And that was a pretty big deal. So it was literally a living death, and it was a living death within your flesh as well. So it was pretty big. So chapter 14 then actually speaks about how one is cleansed from leprosy. Remember, again, this isn't cleansed as in healed from leprosy, but cleansed as in now you are moved from the realm of unclean back into the realm of clean. So you're enabled to come back into the community, into the sanctuary. We'll see that taking place in chapter 14. We're not going to do all of chapter 14. We're going to stop at verse 32 here. So I'll go ahead and read it. Leviticus chapter 14. And if you're following along, I'm with the ESV. Pick your favorite translation, as long as it's not the Message. And we should be fine. So the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "This shall be the law of the leprous person for the day of his cleansing. He shall be brought to the priest, and the priest shall go out of the camp, and the priest shall look. Then, if the case of leprous disease is healed in the leprous person, the priest shall command them to take for him who is to be cleansed 2 live clean birds, and cedar wood, and scarlet yarn, and hyssop. And the priest shall command them to kill one of the birds in an earthenware vessel over fresh water. He shall take the live bird with the cedar wood and the scarlet yarn and the hyssop, and dip them and the live bird in the blood of the bird that was killed over the fresh water. And he shall sprinkle it 7 times on him who is to be cleansed of the leprous disease. Then he shall pronounce him clean, and shall let the living bird go into the open field. And he who is to be cleansed shall wash his clothes and shave off all of his hair and bathe himself in water, and he shall be clean. And after that he may come into the camp, but live outside his tent 7 days. And on the seventh day you shall shave off all of his hair from his head, his beard, his eyebrows, and he shall shave off all of his hair, and then he shall wash his clothes and bathe his body in water, and he shall be clean. Okay, so we're going to just pause there real quickly. You'll notice what's happening here is this is entrance back into the community, but not full entrance back into the community. So this whole process of cleansing for lepers, it's a two-step process. First, it's this cleansing in order to be brought back into the community, and then you got to wait another 7 days, and then you got to go into the sanctuary before you can actually go into your house. So you got to kind of live outside of your own household, still within the community though, for this 7 days. So you're brought back into this communion with the community, but not fully, not 100% restored yet, because you haven't been restored in the sanctuary before the Lord. You haven't been cleansed in the ritual, spiritual sense before the Lord yet. That's yet to happen. So this kind of break down what happens here. The leper's guy has been declared a leper, has been declared to have skin disease, and this can be anything from within your hands or anywhere on your body or your flesh. Remember chapter 13, the worst is if it's on your head, right? Because the head resembles the entirety of the body or represents the entirety of the body. So skin disease on the head is the worst of all, right? This is the living death of all living deaths if you have this skin disease on your head. So a priest, and it seems as if kind of the Hebrew gives this this kind of thought that this priest who would declare somebody unclean with a leprous disease and then again clean with a leprous disease, it seems as if this was a priest that kind of had this designation. Like maybe he was just kind of designated to deal with these sort of things, or an expert in these sort of things, in order to distinguish whether or not said sore on your hand was actually a leprous flesh-eating disease, or if it was just a scab, or whatever the case may be. And so, presumably, the same priest that takes a look at it and declares it a leprous disease is the same priest who goes out and says, "Oh, you've been cleansed from it. It's no longer there." Or, excuse me, you haven't been cleansed from it. You've been healed from it, right? Physically, you no longer have this disease. So the priest actually goes outside the camp. Remember, the leper is outside the camp already because he's been declared a leper. He's got to be removed from the entirety of the community here because it's this living death sort of thing. And so the priest has to go outside of the camp. Now, when the priest goes outside the camp, he'll take a look at this the disease. If it's gone, then he'll say, okay, let's go to step 2. This actually go to the ritualistic spiritual cleansing of you. And so you're supposed to take 2 live birds. And these are birds out there in the wild. So you're supposed to actually catch these 2 wild birds. That's how the Hebrew describes it. It's not these tame birds, but it's these 2 wild birds. And one of the birds is slaughtered, right, in an earthenware vessel above moving water, a spring or a small brook or something like that. And the blood is put in there. The blood is also kind of mixed with this living water, as it's called. And then the bird, and this is the weird thing, the bird, along with a cedar branch, some scarlet yarn, and hyssop, is all kind of mixed together in this bowl. So the live bird is mixed together and covered in this blood. And then the live bird is set free out once into the wild again. And this resembles something that we're going to see later on in chapter 16 with the scapegoat, right? The scapegoat has the sins of the people placed upon him, and then he's sent out into the wilderness. He's not slaughtered. He's not sacrificed. He's sent out into the wilderness. So there's a small resemblance there, although there's a little bit of a theological difference. But what this resembles, with this bird being kind of placed in this blood and then set free, is this is kind of a symbolic way to show that the man or the woman who had this leprous disease, who was once declared unclean and living this living death, he is now once again brought back into the community, right? He is no longer dead, but he is able to be brought back into the community, which is a wonderful, beautiful thing. So that's what this letting this live bird go. So then he'll take this scarlet yarn, this cedar branch, this hyssop, he'll mix it in the blood, and he shall sprinkle it 7 times on the guy who's going to be cleansed, ritually cleansed from this disease. And then he'll pronounce this man cleansed, clean. And so now the guy's got to bathe, he's got to wash his clothes, he's got to shave all the hair off of his body, and then he can go back into the camp. He goes back into the camp, but he can't go into his tent. Okay, so that's where we're at. So then on the 7th day, he's got to shave everything once again. He's got to bathe again, and then he's got to launder his clothes once again so that he's prepared on the 8th day to be cleansed and purified to go into the sanctuary. Now he's going to go into the sanctuary. He's going to go into the tabernacle, later on into the temple. Okay? And to do this, he's got to be, once again, cleansed and purified in order to be fully cleansed and purified by the sacrifices that are going to happen in the sanctuary there. So, starting again with verse 10. On the 8th day, he shall take 2 male lambs without blemish, and 1 ewe lamb, so female lamb, a year old without blemish, and a grain offering of 3/10 of an ephah of fine flour, mixed with oil, and 1 log of oil, or a measure of oil. Let's see, in my note here it says about 1/3 of a quart. So there you go, that much oil. Okay. And the priest who cleanses him shall set the man who is to be cleansed in these things before the Lord at the entrance of the tent of the meeting. And the priest shall take 1 of the male lambs and offer it for a guilt offering or a reparations offering, along with the log, the measure of oil, and wave them for a wave offering before the Lord. So we've got this, the 1 of the lambs, and we've got the oil, and then the priest actually elevates this for the Lord, right? This very distinguished, set aside, this is to the Lord. This sacrifice is to the Lord. So that's what he's doing as this wave offering. It sounds weird in the English, but this is what he's doing. He's lifting it up to the Lord. And he shall kill the lamb in the place where they kill the sin offering and the burnt offering in the place of the sanctuary. That's kind of right, I believe, in our little diagram, right to the north, right to the up above where the altar is. For the guilt offering, or the reparations offering, like the sin offering, belongs to the priest. It is most holy. So all the meat that's going to be left over from this guilt offering, from this reparations offering, is going to be given to the priests. It is most holy. Okay. The priest shall then take some of the blood of the guilt offering, and the priest shall put it on the lobe of the right ear of him who is to be cleansed, and on the thumb of his right hand, and I'm not going to bring my toe out, and on the big toe of his right foot. Then the priest shall take some of the log of oil and pour it into the palm of his own left hand, and and dip his right finger in the oil that is in his left hand, and sprinkle some of that oil with his finger 7 times before the Lord on the altar. Okay, so this is this dedicating of this oil to the Lord. All right. Now some of the oil that remains in the hand of the priest shall be put on the lobe of the right ear, of him who is to be cleansed, on the thumb, and on the big toe of his right foot, and then the rest on the top of the blood of, So the blood's been here, the blood's been here, the blood's been on the toe. Now you put the oil over the ear, over the thumb, over the blood on the toe as well. Verse 18, and the rest of the oil that is in the man's hand he shall put on the head of him who is to be cleansed. Then the priest shall make atonement for him before the Lord. The priest shall offer the sin offering to make atonement for him who is to be cleansed from his uncleanness. And afterward he shall kill the burnt offering, and the priest shall offer the burnt offering and the grain offering on the altar. Thus the priest shall make atonement for him, and he shall be clean. Okay. I'm not going to take the time to read verses 21 through 32. It's basically the exact same thing, except as it is with almost every single offering, there's given an option. If you don't have a lot of money, if you're poor, if you're of meager means, you can bring for the sin offering and the guilt offering, instead of another lamb, you can bring turtle doves, 2 turtle doves, 2 pigeons. So, and then the exact same thing happens there. Okay, so let's kind of go on what happens here. Again, so the man comes into the sanctuary, right? And he's at the entrance there. And at the entrance there, then the priest comes and he takes the guilt offering, the lamb, and then he takes the oil, he dedicates it to the Lord. Then he takes some of he slaughters the lamb, places it on the ear, the thumb, and on the foot. Now, we've talked about this before. You may not remember. I didn't remember until I kind of studied this again and remembered all this. But what this is actually doing, and then when the oil goes on those same places, what this is actually doing is ritually cleansing the individual once again, so that this person is able to once again hear the word of the Lord on the ear, right? Receive and touch the holy things that come from the sanctuary. And remember, the holy things that come from the sanctuary are the things of the sacrifices that you bring, that you're allowed to take home and then eat, right? So you bring a sacrifice, a burnt offering sacrifice, right? A burnt offering sacrifice. And then you're allowed to take some of that meat home, and then you can eat it with yourself, and your family can eat of it, right? So it's a gift from the Lord's own table given to you to eat, right? To sustain you, to nourish you. So that, once again, that's what the thumb is for, right? The individual who has been deemed unclean, a leper who's been unclean, is not able to touch any of these holy things, is not able to touch any of these, the meat from this holy offering, is not able to receive the gifts given from the Lord's table, because he is unclean, he is set aside, and especially from this leprous understanding, he's living death, right? He's dead for all intents and purposes. Okay, and then on the foot, the reason for the foot is this signifies that the individual is once again clean to come in into the Lord's presence within his sanctuary. So all of this declares to himself and declares to the congregation, declares to the whole community that this person is once again cleansed, right? He has once again been brought back from death into life. He's once again fully reinstated into the community, so that not only can he interact with people on a daily, regular basis, not only can he receive and eat the holy things from the Lord's table, but also that he can go into the sanctuary along with everybody else, which is a beautiful thing, right? This whole restoration process of someone who is unclean, who is now being brought once again to be clean in the eyes of the Lord, and then because of in the eyes of the Lord, because of everybody else. So he is clean because of the blood, right? He's cleansed because of the blood and because of the sacrifice there. You can kind of hear exactly where this is going to take place and culminate and be in fulfillment with Christ, right? Okay, let me see if there's anything else here that I wanted to cover. I'm not sure. I think that's all the actual ritual process that's going to happen here, right? So let's cover just a couple more things here. And there's a couple different levels of purity just for a theological reference that's happening here, right? And I just want to kind of hammer this in of what's happening. The first level is the purification allows the person to come back into the camp. And that's established, and that happens outside of the camp with the wild bird that's slaughtered. Then there's this degree of purity that qualifies him to go into the sanctuary, and that's happening with the shaving of the hair and the bathing and all of this sort of stuff. And then there's this level that qualifies him to stand before God once again in the divine service, and that's when he's has the blood of the rite of the guilt sacrifice being placed upon him. Okay? And then after all that's done, presumably, then he can actually go back home and he can live with his family once again. He can go into his own home. He can go into his own tent. He can be embraced by his wife, or if it's a woman, embraced by her husband and her kids and his kids, whatever the case may be. Right? This complete and full restoration back in to what's happening here. All right. So now we've talked for about 20 minutes with that. Now let's talk about this fulfillment by Christ. And we can kind of see how this takes place and who Christ is and how he makes us righteous in his sight once again. But let's actually take a couple looks, or this look at a couple different places, where we actually see Jesus interacting with lepers. Now, specifically in the Old Testament, we don't see anything that says that the Messiah, a sign of the Messiah will be that he fulfills this cleansing of lepers specifically. But it does have this healing of diseases, right? The Messiah is going to heal all of these diseases. And what's really interesting, and I found this really interesting and fascinating, was when we look at Isaiah 53. That is the suffering servant song in Isaiah, right? Everybody knows it. We get to hear it on Good Friday. And it's this suffering servant, right? So the prophecy that's declared of this suffering servant, that he would be deemed stricken by God, right? We've all heard that word. It's Isaiah 53:4, right? He's stricken by God, afflicted. This stricken word that we translate into the English is the same Hebrew term that's oftentimes and almost always used in the book of Leviticus to refer to somebody that has an infection, or he's been stricken with a skin disease. So we have this same word being used here, right? So in Leviticus, when somebody has a skin disease, they use this word, he's been inflicted, right? Or an infection, afflicted with this skin disease. This infection word is the same word for he's been stricken. Speaking of the suffering servant, speaking of Jesus, right? So we've got this, Jesus, the suffering servant, is going to heal his people, or heal all the people of their unclean diseases by being afflicted, with them, being one of them, right? And we really do see how the person with this skin disease, this leprous disease, is really just a small example of all of us are unclean, right? And unclean not physically with a disease per se, but unclean because of our sin. And so we've got this suffering servant who's going to be stricken by God, afflicted, right, with the same infection that we do. He in and of himself had no sin. He bore no sin in and of himself, and yet he took on our sin, right? Paul says he became sin, right? He who knew no sin became sin. That's Jesus. He takes on our actual afflictions, right? He's inflicted with the very sin that causes us to be unclean, right? And then he's stricken even unto death. And his life is that sacrificial sacrifice. It's that sacrifice of reparation, that offering given to the Lord, in order that, because as the suffering servant, he indeed is the sacrificial lamb as well. And because of that, because all of the sin of the world has been placed on him, and then in his death, he's able to give us life, right? He'll justify the sinners, justify you and me, right? By being our intercessor, by making intercession for us. Okay, so that's a beautiful thing that we can see, that actually Jesus is fulfilling this Old Testament stuff. And we see it in Isaiah 53, and then we see it actually take place in the life of Jesus as he goes to the cross. But we see it in the life of Jesus as well, when he actually comes upon people and he heals them of all of their diseases. And we do have a couple specific times in which he heals people with leprosy. And he does it in weird ways, or not completely weird ways, but he does it in ways that are different than the Old Testament. right? Because the Old Testament, the priest would go out and he wasn't healing anybody. Remember, we got to make certain of that. The priest wasn't going out there and through sacrificing a lamb and putting blood on this person, and that was the antidote to a leper's disease. This was the cleansing of the person who had been healed already from this leper's disease. Jesus does something completely different, right? He is the great high priest who goes out there, but he doesn't just see somebody who had a leprous disease and then say, you are cleansed, but he does the cleansing. Not just the cleansing, but the healing. So he heals them and he makes them clean once again. Heals them physically and then makes them clean spiritually, right? Which is completely different than what the priest did, but it's also a beautiful fulfillment of what the priest did. The priest couldn't do this because he was only a shadow of the high priest to come, the true high priest in the order of Melchizedek, right? Which is Jesus. So we see this happening in the Synoptic Gospels, that's Matthew, Mark, and Luke, a couple different times. But one of the remarkable ones is, you can find this in Matthew chapter 8 or Mark chapter 1 or Luke chapter 5. It's the same account. We're going to read it out of Luke, I believe. Luke chapter 5, it's a short account, right? This is when Jesus, this is right after he calls his first disciples, so it's really early on in his ministry, and he comes upon some lepers, or a leper, excuse me. While Jesus was in one of the cities, there came a man full of leprosy. Not just a little teeny spot of leprosy. He was full of leprosy. And when he saw Jesus, he fell on his face and begged him. This is Luke chapter 5, beginning with verse 12. And he said, Lord, if you will, you can make me clean. And Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him. And this is, again, completely different than what the priests did, right? Because the priests aren't allowed to touch somebody of a leprous disease, because the leprous disease, we already talked about this already, they are almost part and parcel of a corpse. They're a living corpse, living death, right? And to touch a corpse, you become ritually unclean. And so the priest wasn't allowed to touch this leprous disease. He could stand there and look at it. I don't know, presumably even maybe from a bit of a distance. Social distancing. There you go. All the way back in the book of Leviticus. Social distancing. 6 feet. And the priest could take a look at this leprous disease. But here's Jesus, who doesn't mind that this guy is coming up and right at his feet, falling down and begging for mercy. But then Jesus actually touches the man. This unclean man, Jesus touches, which would render him unclean, except that it doesn't, except that it does, because he takes on all of our sin and takes on all of our uncleanness, and then replaces that, right, with his cleanliness, right? Takes on our sin, replaces it with his holy righteousness. So, again, in verse 13, and Jesus stretched out his hand and touched the leper, saying, I will be clean. And immediately the leprosy left him. And Jesus charged him to tell no one, but go and show yourself to the priest and make an offering for your cleansing, as Moses commanded, for a proof to them. Now, what he's doing here is the temple is still there. It's still functioning as a part of society. Oftentimes we wonder, if Jesus is the fulfillment of the temple and all the sacrificial systems, why is he telling this guy to go do this? And this is this kind of 30-year transitional period where the temple is still playing an operative role in bringing people back into the community as well. And so for this person who's a leper, who's living outside the camp of everybody else, for him to be able to go into the city, because everybody knows he's a leper, everybody knows he lives out there, for him to be able to be brought back in, he actually does kind of have to have this doctor's note, if you will, right, or a negative COVID test to be able to go back into society. And so this is what's happening. That Jesus says, you go to the priest, do what you're supposed to do as Moses told you, right? Bring the sacrifices there so the priest can declare that you're clean, and then you can go back and you can actually be incorporated back into society. Okay, the second one, and this is the one that we always hear about, and we'll end with this. This is, and I'm not going to read it, but this is found in Luke chapter 10. And it's, I believe it's Luke chapter 10, right? Let me see here. Luke chapter 17. And we get to hear this in the 3-year lectionary in the C series, so that's going to be in a couple years, but we also get to hear it every single Thanksgiving Day. That's the gospel reading for the day of Thanksgiving. And it is Jesus cleansing the 10 lepers. And so we've got the Jesus cleansing the 10 lepers, 9 of which are Jews. One is a Samaritan. Jesus tells them to go and show yourself to the priests. And while they go, they're cleansed. And the 9 who are Jews, they continue on to the priests. And there's some theologically interesting things that happen with that. But again, one of the reasons is because this allows them to be incorporated back into the community, the Jewish community, and it allows them to go into the temple and the sanctuary and all of this. But the Samaritan, he didn't need to go to the temple to be declared clean so that he could go back into the community of his Samaritan brothers, right? That wasn't there. But also we have this understanding of when he comes back, right? Jesus says, we're not all 10 cleansed, we're the other 9. And only this leper, only this Samaritan came back, because the Samaritan knew that God in the flesh was right there. This Jesus of Nazareth was the one who cleansed him from his leprosy, and more than that, cleansed him. He's God in the flesh. And not only is he just cleansing me outwardly and physically, but this is the one, this is the Messiah that we've all been waiting for, Jews and Samaritans. Right? They've all been waiting for this Messiah, and here he is walking around. And he falls at Jesus' feet and he begins to worship him. And Jesus says, rise, go your way, right? You are cleansed, you are clean. I have forgiven you all your sins. I am your sacrificial lamb. I am your great high priest. I am everything. I cleanse you. Okay, I think that's good. I don't think we're going to finish up chapter 14. The rest of chapter 14 is how to cleanse an infected house. We could get into that, but I think we're going to jump on to chapter 15, and then, which is some weird stuff, some sexual stuff. Weird's not the right word, but it's sexual stuff that we probably usually just gloss over because it makes us uncomfortable. So let's be uncomfortable together and go ahead and read it. So we'll do chapter 15, and then we get to jump into chapter 16, which is the Day of Atonement, which is the biggie, right? The scapegoat. So until later on, the Lord be with you.